Okay, get ready to be able to connect more deeply with your inner empowerment and strength, because my guest today is Barbara Bartolome, who not only had two near-death experiences, but she was given a message by God that gave her the courage to leave an abusive relationship. So today we're going to talk about that and many, many more things, including signs and synchronicities that she has in her life. You are not going to want to miss this. Are you ready? Okay, today my guest is Barbara Bartolome, who not only had two near-death experiences, but also regularly hears guidance, confirmations, and warnings from her spirit team. Barbara is the founder and chapter president of the IONS Santa Barbara, California division, and the IONS is the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And through this chapter, Barbara likes to help people to understand that death does not define us. So, Barbara, I know you personally, you are such a bright, wonderful person, and I am just so excited to have you here. Welcome.
Love you, Laurie. I always wish that I was with you. Believe me.
Oh, that's so nice. I know we live about 6 hours away, and we have not met in person, but we've talked many times. And Barbara's just, she's so great. So I'm so excited that you're here with me today, and I'm really excited for what you're about to share with the audience. So would you like to start with your first near-death experience?
Yes, well, actually, I'm going to start with my second because
I
that's
mean,
the one
second one. Yes, yes,
I
yes.
remember all the details of, and I'll tell you about the first one afterwards. So it was 1987 and it was December. And that year I had given birth to a little baby girl in July. And about a month after the birth, I was injured. And I'll add more to that in a bit. I was injured and I went to a doctor, and the initial doctor said, "You're never going to walk again." And I was 31 years old and I wasn't able to accept that idea. So I ended up asking friends around me, and they said, "Go to this neurosurgeon. He's totally the top guy in Santa Barbara." So I made an appointment, and he looked at my x-rays and my CAT scans and my PET scans and said, "I can fix this." So I was excited about the thought of walking again. And it was an injury in my lower back. I had ruptured my L5-S1 disc, and the sciatica and pain in the whole area just was causing me not to be able to even walk. So he scheduled surgery, and in December, I entered the hospital the night before the surgery because he had brought on to the team of his surgical team an orthopedic surgeon, and the two of them had decided that I needed an additional test. So they were going to have a myelogram conducted at the hospital, and that's a test where they inject iodine dye into your spinal cord, and then they tip an x-ray table that you're laying on so that the dye will run down your spinal cord with gravity and go to the area where your blown out disc is and see if maybe a piece of the disc might have chipped your spinal cord, because they want to make sure that they're fixing everything that they need to the next day in surgery. So in the midst of this, they've injected the iodine dye into the back of my neck area up here. They've just numbed it, so I'm perfectly awake and no, anything in my system to make me be, under sedation or anything. And the x-ray tech made a mistake. He began talking to the other x-ray tech who was going to be watching the monitor and taking the pictures when the dye got to the right place in my spine. But they began talking about their weekend plans. And instead of watching where he was pushing his finger on the button of the table, he was pushing the wrong button. And I didn't know it. He didn't know it. No one, two doctors were in the room, the neurosurgeon and the orthopedic surgeon. They were talking to each other. And, this was just a regular, it wasn't any big deal. It wasn't like I was going to die, but I did. So the table started tipping, and I started feeling really funny because the dye was going right from the back of my neck into my brain. And I felt funny, and I thought, I wonder if I'm supposed to feel like this. And I didn't want to interrupt the two guys. They were the only two people I could see. There was a nurse in the room, but she was over at another table by the door. And and I was laying on my back on the x-ray table, and, I really couldn't like get anyone's attention. And so I kind of held off too long and didn't say anything. And by the time I realized, okay, look, my eyes are rolling to the back of my head. I don't think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I need to say something. And by the time I thought that and wanted to speak up and get their attention, I actually couldn't speak. And I couldn't raise my hand to like touch him or raise my hand to say help or anything. So I was really panicking at that point. And I didn't know what was going wrong. I didn't know his button, the finger was on the wrong button. I didn't know the table was tipping the wrong way. I just knew that something was drastically wrong with me and that I was having a problem. So what ended up happening was that the x-ray tech heard me hyperventilating. It was the last thing that I did before I actually died. And he leaned over the table and he put his head right over my face. And he saw that my eyes were rolling to the back of my head. And I was fighting to make them go forward. So they were going back and forth. And I was hyperventilating. And he then leaned back. The last thing that I saw was him lean back and look to see where his thumb was on the table. And he made this face like, oh my God. And that was the last thing that I saw. My eyes just shut in my body. And next second later, I was up on the ceiling, literally right above my body, looking straight down at my body and at the tops of everyone's heads and the top of the equipment and everything. And I, instead of being panicked like I was in my body, I felt absolute calm, absolute love. I felt just the most amazing, wonderful feeling. And so I then ended up saying, oh, if I'm up here and my body is down there and that man is calling code blue, I think I just died. And right when I said that, there was this absolute feeling of a being next to me. And that's where I felt that I was getting this feeling of, comfort and love and appreciation and kindness and, all the just beautiful. And so I began talking to it, and not with my mouth, of course, because my body was down below, but I began saying very calmly, I really need to go back into my life, because if I leave my children, my 8-year-old son and my 5-month-old daughter, if I leave them in this way at this time, they won't grow up to be the good human beings that they're capable of being. I need to go back. And so the being wasn't saying anything to me, but I said that during the time of them starting all the resuscitation. They immediately started mouth to mouth and chest compressions. The 2 x-ray techs were doing that. And the doctors were yelling orders, and the nurse was on the phone calling for the defib unit, stat. And, big uproar in the room. A nurse came in with an oxygen card, and they put that on my face. So they stopped blowing in my mouth, and they continued to just, the 2 x-ray techs switch turns doing the chest compressions for 2 minutes at a time. And then this man came in with a heart monitor, and I didn't know what it was. And he was peeling off these little white things to put them on my chest. And as I was up on the ceiling talking to the being, I was watching him too. And he was the only thing that I didn't understand what was happening. And I said to the being in the midst of my talking and asking to go back, I said, what is that he's doing? And right then I was moved right in front of the box, which was on a ledge between on the wall. And then the man was standing in between the box and the table where I was laying. And I just like had this box like right in front of my face, in my consciousness, not my body, of course. And so the man's hand crossed between the box and my consciousness, and he flipped this little toggle switch on the side of the box, and then he withdrew his hand. And I watched as this little green light in this long rectangular part of the top of the front of the box lit up, and it started making a monotone sound, and it started traveling across the screen. And I still did not know what it was. And I watched it go all the way across the first time, second time, and then the third time, about a third of the way over, it hit me of what it was. And I said, oh, that's a heart monitor. I don't have a heartbeat. It's a flat line. And when I said that, then I was moved back up to the ceiling again next to the being, and I was watching from above again. So it was kind of like I was moved down there to see what it was I asked for. And then when I figured it out, I was back up again. So I was continuing to watch everything down below. And the neurosurgeon said to the orthopedic surgeon, too much time has passed. She's going to be brain dead. We need to do something. And so the orthopedic surgeon said, stand clear. And the two guys that were up there doing the chest compressions and up around the front of the table, and the nurse that was up there, they all stepped back. And the orthopedic surgeon took 2 steps forward, took his hand from behind his back, and he just came down and struck the center of my chest. And I'd never seen that either. I didn't know what that was. I found out years later from a nurse friend of mine that's called a precardial thump. It is done in last ditch situations where they don't have the defib unit in there and the person needs to be resuscitated, and that can shock the heart back into beating. So he struck my chest. I watched my body, even though I wasn't in it, I watched it respond to that, because that hard of a blow, your body kind of jerks. And then up on the ceiling, the being said to me in this beautiful voice I could never imitate well. It was so precious. And it went, but if you go back, you'll still be in your marriage. What will you do? And the story behind it is that I was married to an engineer here in Santa Barbara, and I had moved down from Oregon, where I had met him up in Oregon, and we had briefly known each other maybe 9 months or something up there. Then we moved down here and we got married in Santa Barbara. And about 3 months later, I started to see who he was really, and he started to be really abusive to me, to my son. I didn't have my daughter yet. And so I went through a lot of trauma, a lot of being hurt, a lot of damage, a lot of danger, and trying to protect my son, trying to get my husband to change, trying to help him. Marriage family therapist rejected, pastor of church rejected, letters to him, crying, pleading. I left him for a year. He begged me to come back and said that he'd changed. Of course he hadn't. And so I'd never been around someone who was abusive before, and there wasn't any locations in Santa Barbara, any groups or clubs or anything for me to find anything out about that. And the internet really wasn't up and running at that time. And I didn't really know what to do. So I ended up with this traumatic person, and he had actually injured my back. So that's why I had the problem with my back. And he had actually injured me during the pregnancy. And I almost lost the baby as well. So I was struggling with all of that. And what ended up happening was that when I'm going to say it's God, because that's who it felt like to me, when he said, you'll still be in your marriage, what will you do? He showed me all these film clips that just went flash, 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 flash. And they were incidents that I had actually been involved in with my husband, where he had hurt me, hit me, berated me, knocked me to the floor, pushed me against the wall, etc. So I was shown all the abuse, and then I was given all the time to think about all the things that I had done to try to help him change in the 7 years that I'd been married to him. So I realized at the end of thinking about the things that I'd done, that he wasn't capable of changing, that I'd done everything that I possibly could. And so I said to the being, after I thought of all those things and I came to that conclusion, I said, if you let me go back, I promise you that I'll get strong enough to leave him. I realized I was really reduced in my personal power by what he had done over the years and the things that he had done, and I needed to get strong. So the second that I said the word him in that sentence, the doctor did the second precardial thump, struck my chest, and my eyes shut from up on the ceiling, and I opened my eyes and I had the oxygen mask over my face. I was back in my body. And I knew everything that had just happened up there, and I'd watched everything that had just happened down below. And it was, I was alarmed, and I said into the oxygen mask, what just happened? And the nurse looked over at, kind of leaned over, and she said, stop, don't talk. We need to stabilize you. So for 20 minutes, they did whatever it was that they had to do to stabilize me. And then they finally took the oxygen mask off. And I said again, what just happened? I was up on the ceiling and I could see and hear everything. And the neurosurgeon standing right next to the table, he goes, "Oh, brother." But that was a beautiful moment because it made me, at 31 years old, completely recount what I had just seen from up on the ceiling. So I said, no, she was on the phone calling for the defib unit, pointing at the nurse that was over at the table by the desk, by the corner of the room. And you were talking to him and you were yelling out this and you said that. And then they were doing chest compressions. And when the oxygen cart came in, she brought it in. And I completely told them what had just happened. And while I was doing that, the neurosurgeon clenched his fists and he had this look on his face like, and he went, "I'm not going to stand here and listen to this." And he stormed out of the room. But the orthopedic surgeon stayed, took my hand, and everybody else stayed. And they were all in shock. They were just like, and he said, "What else did you see? And tell me again what you saw. What did you feel? What was it like?" So he was asking me questions to, understand more about what I'd just been through, but the other doctor scoomed out of there. So the next day they did the surgery. No one in the hospital, I was there 4 days, no one would talk to me about it. Even the next day when I was in the recovery area after the surgery, the two doctors were coming towards me and I said, "What happened last night during my myelogram?" And the neurosurgeon guy put his hand up and said, "I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to tell you what happened during your surgery. I'm not going to discuss that." And so I was really closed down by all of that. And when my now ex-husband came to visit me later that day, I told him what had happened. And he said, "Oh, that couldn't have happened. You probably hallucinated it." So I didn't talk about it with anybody because I was not the type of person. I'd never done drugs. I'd had a secret clearance with the Department of Defense, which means they go through your background like fine tooth comb. And my mom had been a police officer and I was always never drugs, never alcohol. I was just like, didn't want to do that stuff. So what ended up happening was that I just buried it for about 12 years. And I ended up talking with a nurse at the hospital that was a friend of mine, and she ended up telling me it was a near-death experience. And so by that time, the internet had come up and I was able to see the IONS organization online, as well as the NDERF organization, which is the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation run by Dr. Jeffrey Long. And so I ended up writing up a very brief synopsis of my near-death experience because he posts those on his website, thousands and thousands of them. And I didn't think anything of it. And about 2 years later, 2011, actually 2009, I ended up getting called by him and he told me about the IONS conference that was going to be in San Diego, California. And so he said, if you'd like to go, you'd meet a lot of other experiencers there. That was really amazing to me that I would get to meet someone else who'd had the same experience because, of course, you feel really alone when it happens to you. You're not sure. So I went and I had an amazing time. And what ended up happening was that I met PMH Atwater after one of her talks. And she's a very big researcher in the near-death experience field. And she had talked about the different aspects that are after a near-death experience, what the after effects are for experiencers. And it really threw me off because when she was speaking about the after effects, which would be like intuition and precognition and manifestation and the types of things that, people think are kind of woo-woo out there in the big world. Well, it was really interesting to me because I realized as she was talking that I'd had all of the things that she said were after effects long before I had my NDE at age 31. I'd had them all the way back to my childhood. And so I was very disconcerted when she said that. And I sat there and thought about it. And how could I have these all the way back if I didn't have my NDE till I was 31? So I approached her after her talk and I told her that, I was questioning that. And she said, you need to talk with your family and find out if there was something that may have happened to you when you were young that you haven't been told about. Well, at the time I thought, really? I had another near-death experience when I was young. Come on, I didn't say that to her. She didn't know that I was thinking that, but it was just like, what? And wouldn't my family tell me?
Yeah.
So I was seeing my brother a month later. He's 10 years older than me. And I needed to figure out a way to like tell him that I wanted him to tell me if anything happened without actually telling him my near death experience, because I'd never told anybody in my family. And
Mm.
so we went up to have dinner with him. And before we went into the restaurant, I said, "Hey, Brad, I'm doing this medical review of my entire life. And I've got all my, vaccinations listed and all my surgeries listed and everything that's major. I want to have that ready in case I ever have anything go on in my life that doctor would need to see that. So all my records are in place. And so if you can remember anything from my early childhood that I need to add, that you remember, please let me know." So we had this wonderful dinner with his wife and his daughter, and we were having so much fun. My husband, I got remarried, by the way, to a wonderful person. That's the other answer, is not the bad guy. So he's no longer around my. So we were having this dinner, and afterwards, we were outside the restaurant, and he said, "Hey," he put his hand on my arm, and my brother said, "Barb, there's something I need to tell you." And at this time, I was 53 years old. So my first, NDE, I didn't know about. The second one was at age 31. And I found out about the first one when I was 53 years old. He told me that I'd had a very high fever at age 18 months. My mom was very, very pregnant with my little sister, who's about 18 months younger than me. So it was right about the time she was ready to deliver. And that I had gone into convulsions and stopped breathing. And the fire department was called, and they were sending an ambulance over, and they told my parents to submerge me up to my neck in tepid bath water, and then slowly add ice cubes to slowly lower my body temperature so I wouldn't go into shock. And my brother was standing there when I self-resuscitated. He said, "You just came back to life. You were soft purple. You hadn't been breathing for quite a long time." He said, "There was nothing alive about you." And he said, "All of a sudden, you just arched your back, took a deep breath, and burst into tears like a redheaded Barbie would usually do at 18 months old." So he said, you had this situation happen when you were 18 months old, you died. And so I couldn't believe it. So I ended up telling my brother about my near-death experience. He was very open to it because of what he'd seen earlier in my life. So the NDEs both opened me to the after effects that I feel that I've had all through my life. And I've had these amazing experiences that I know you want me to talk about.
I have some questions about your
Oh,
NDEs. I think
sure.
people would really like to understand.
Okay.
So the second one, where you were up on the ceiling with the bean, did you ever see the bean, or did you only feel the bean?
I felt him, and I never felt, because he felt so known to me, I didn't feel like I needed to turn and look to see if there was any visual. I was watching what was happening down below, and that's where my attention was. I was just simply communicating with him, and it felt as though I'd been part of him and he'd been part of me since long before I ever was born on this earth. So he felt like if my husband was standing next to me, my husband and I have now been married 29 years. If he was standing next to me and we were talking, I wouldn't need to look and see who he was because I know who he is. It was like that times 1,000 times. It was just like he was who he was, and I knew exactly who he was. So I didn't look to see if there was any physical at all. No.
Oh, wow. Okay. So then you mentioned at one point that you weren't sure who the being was, but then you said later that you think that maybe it was God. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I try to keep it open for people because I myself felt immediately that it was God. I knew
Okay.
that being was God. But a lot of people are closed to the word God, and I don't think God really cares whether he's called being or God or Jehovah or any other name that's out there. I think he could care less about what people call him, and instead are looking for that connection and that love going back and forth for that to be, and that's what was happening. So I personally knew in my heart that for me, it was who I had always felt had always been close to me. And it felt to me in my terms that I used to be God. So that's who
Okay.
it was for me. Yeah.
So the feelings that you were feeling of love and peace, where do you think those were coming from?
From him. from him. Absolutely. I felt like I was wrapped in the warmest, sweetest blanket of just love and acceptance. And I didn't feel like there was anything to worry about out of my body, watching them all panicking down below, having it be so loud and noisy. It was actually obnoxious. And I felt perfectly fine up above. The only thing that pulled me back to my life was the thought of my children being with that husband and being damaged by him in their lives. That was what caused me to want to go back to protect them. That was really the only thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the most inspiring things about this story is the fact that when we choose somebody and we decide that we're going to get married, I think a lot of us stay for various reasons. And sometimes one of the reasons is because we made a commitment to this other person. We made a commitment. I'm going to marry you. We're going to be together for life. And that's what I said I was going to do. But it sounds like he became a very different person
Oh,
after knowing him for a short amount of time, obviously caused a great deal of pain. But I want to go back to God saying to you, what are you going to do about your marriage? Because it was almost like, I don't know if I want to call it, he gave you permission, or do you feel like it was permission, or do you feel like he was asking you what you wanted to do? Or do you think he was telling you what you needed to do? How do you think that was
no.
coming across?
He knew that I wanted to go back to protect the children, but he was warning me that if I went back, I would still be in my marriage with all of that trauma and danger, and that I needed to think about, you know, no, not only him showing me those little flashes of all those events that I had been trying to forgive and forget about through the course of our marriage. It would happen and I would, be mad about it for months, but then, that one would go away because the next one would take over, the next event that he, did something. And so I was forgetting the events as I was going through the process of being married to him. And I think this was a reminder to me of all the things that you've lived through. And then I had this, it was amazing because I'm pretty sure that the doctor did a precardial thump right after the first one, seconds later. But up there, it seemed like I was up there for 5 to 10 minutes, evaluating all of the things that I had done to try to help him change. And then coming to the realization, which I think God helped me get to, that he wasn't capable of changing. That wasn't his path. And that I needed to get strong enough to leave him. And that's what I said when I said, if you'll let me go back, I promise you I'll get strong enough to leave him. I needed to reclaim that, I can make it in the world, because he had taken me from a very strong individual to a very weak individual. I was always concerned about, he took my money that I earned every month. I didn't get to actually have any say over what our money did. He gave me like a $25 a month stipend, and that's all I got. If I needed to have my hair cut, I needed to save up until I got enough to get my hair cut. It was very controlling. It was a very tough situation. And I didn't want to tell my, family. And my mom had already, police officer, she had already, after our baby was born, came down and she grabbed him by the throat by his shirt like this and pulled his shirt up like this. My mom's like 5'10", and she's like a power woman. And she said, if I ever hear you say anything negative about your newborn daughter again, I swear I'll mop the floor up with you. My mom did that to my husband, like I was like, oh boy. But I had to get strong and I had to grow and get strong again. And I didn't want to depend upon my mom and my dad and their money. And I wanted to try to make it on my own. And I knew it was going to be hard because it was very hard to save up anything. So it was a really tough situation, but I did it. I got out of it. It took me 3 years after that NDE. And after I promised God that I would do it, I had to save for 3 years those $25 stipends, not get my hair cut, not spend it on anything. And I finally saved up $800, which was how much I thought I could pay for an apartment. And I went out. He had a business trip that he was going on. And I had been trying to keep him in balance for 3 years. He'd still fly off the hook, but I was doing everything that I thought I could do to keep him in balance. And then he had this business trip. He was leaving for a week to go to Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So I drove him to the airport, said goodbye, and went. And I had already looked up 5 apartments that I could afford at $800 a month. And I went to the first 4 people and I told them, I have the first month's rent. I'm leaving a very abusive situation. I don't have the deposit, but if you'll trust me, I'll pay $100 a month on top of my rent each month and give you the deposit over an 8-month period. The first 4 people said no. The 5th person looked at me and just sat there and looked in my eyes. And then he finally said, yes, you can move in. And I burst into tears. I had to go pick up my daughter at preschool, and I was totally afraid I wasn't going to find an apartment right away. And I needed to do it, quickly, because he was only going to be gone for a week. And so I said to him, why are you trusting me? And he said, I was raised in the Netherlands during World War II. And he said, many, many Jewish people knocked on my parents' door when I was young and during World War II. And he said they were escaping Nazi Germany. And he said, my parents every single time did whatever they could to help these people, whether they donated their own coat to them, gave them a blanket, a place to stay, food, whatever. He said, today I'm helping you in honor of my parents. Is that just the most beautiful moment?
Wow. It really is. It really is.
If I had moved into that particular apartment, I would have never met my new husband. He was 1/2 block away.
Okay, first of all, I want to say, whatever controlling aspect your husband had on you at that time, you were so strong. And I cannot imagine, saving up every little allowance I had for 3 years, foregoing everything else to have that courage. So kudos to you and the strength that you gathered. And I hope that people are listening, if they're in a situation similar to this, that they can find that inner strength and know that there will be support somehow. But then you didn't just turn over and say, I'm not going to ever be with anybody again. Will you please tell the story of how you, I'm going to call it, manifested your husband that you've been with forever?
Well, after that experience with that person, because he had never shown me the anger issues before we got married, for the time that we lived together before we were married, he never did anything like that. It was probably 3 to 6 months after we married, then he started it up. So I was really scared of everybody out there in the world. And I thought, if he could do that and trick me in that way, so could somebody else. And I just don't want to have to go through that again. So I began thinking about, at first I didn't want to date anybody, and I didn't. And so then when 6 months to a year later, I was sitting there thinking, it was probably about 6 months later, I was thinking, what I need to do is I need to evaluate good character traits and put them on a list and, think about those and ask God to find somebody with those character traits. So I began a list, and I had a little book next to my bed. So after I put the kids to bed and made their lunches for the next day and, was ready, then I would lay in bed and I would think about, kindness and compassion and friendship and love and honesty and integrity. And I started listing all these character traits. I never put anything negative. I only put positive things. And I thought about people in my life, and I thought about their negatives and their positives, and I listed, positives only. And I put the opposites of the negatives. So I'm working on that, and I'm working on that. And every night after I put, whatever I'd thought about during the day, maybe I saw someone at my children's school who was being really kind to someone else. And I thought, you know what? I really want somebody who approaches someone else and helps them in that positive way that person did. So I would write that down. There were a couple times where I wrote a funny thing down, which was I had dated somebody who was shorter than me in college, and he had a big crush on me, and I'm 5'9", and I'm a tall girl. And so I wrote down that when the person dated me in college, he went to a dance with me and he laid his head on my shoulder. And I felt really uncomfortable with that physical situation. And so I wrote on my list, must be tall. And I put big capital letters, exclamation point, exclamation point.
I'm laughing because, of course, I know the punchline to this.
Yes. So And one night I'm cooking dinner for the kids and I'm, go to bed and I'm tired and I've been through my whole work day and the kids. And I wrote, must like TV dinners because I'm so tired of. So there weren't just positives. There was just, that was positive too, but it was like funny one. So this one Saturday, my son comes in and he's got this girl with him. He's in 8th grade. She's in 7th grade. And he says, this is Erin. She lives in the neighborhood and we want to go to a movie together. Will you go with us? And I ended up saying yes. And so then they said, well, come over and pick us up over at her house. She lives right around the corner, literally half a block from me. And so I kind of changed out of my grubbies and I went over and I went to pick them up and I knock on the front door of the house they told me to go to. And this 7-foot tall guy opens the front door. He's now my husband for 29 years. The kids were putting us together. They had asked him to go to the movie as well when he'd already agreed. I had agreed. So I was really embarrassed. I thought I was going to croak of embarrassment. And we got to the movie and they made us sit next to each other. I mean, it was just like, oh no, I can't believe he's doing this. But all the time when I would ask, after I would write those things in the book, I would ask God and I would say, I don't know who this person is. And I don't know, when's the right time for them and for me, for them to come into my life. But I know that you know that. And I know that you know the way that to bring them in so that I can have time to evaluate this list and see that they are a good person, because I don't want to waste my time on anybody else who's going to do this trauma again. And so, yeah, it was just amazing. Literally 6 months to the day after the kids introduced us, we were married at the tall tower in Santa Barbara, at the Santa Barbara Courthouse Tower. And that was the tallest place that I could take my tall guy. And we had our friends and family with us and our children, and we got married. And that was 29 years ago. And he's still on that list. I can go through that list and check off still all of the things that are on that list were exactly the person I got. So yes, manifestation is real. If you want something bad enough and you ask the other side to help you with it, I'm pretty sure a lot of times, if they think it's a good thing for your life, you're going to get it.
So, oh my gosh. So what I love about your story is not only did you have the strength to leave something that wasn't working, but you didn't just jump back in. You knew that you needed to find somebody that had these certain qualities, and you spent a long amount of time writing these down and really analyzing and thinking about and really focusing your attention on the positives of what you wanted. And then look, you've been married now for 29 years, and just that's a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. So after you had your second NDE at the age of 31, how long after that did you start to notice synchronicities and hearing your guidance in your life?
So not until, well, see, I'd had them all the way through. And actually, as a child, I had them and they would freak out my mom. So one of the things that happened when I was like 5 years old, I was downtown in Salem, Oregon with my mom, and she was holding on to my hand, and she was also holding on to my little sister's hand, and she would have been about 3.5 or 3.25. So she was walking along with both of us. We were stopped at an intersection at the crosswalk, and it wasn't green for us. And all of a sudden, I did something that you never did with my mom. I broke her grip, and then I covered my face, and I was like peeking through my hands, but I was like hiding myself. And my mom looked down at me in, anger and said, "What are you doing?" And I whispered through my hands, "They're going to crash." And right as I said that, this car ran the red light and T-boned a car in the intersection and pushed it to the far side. And the whole big noise and everything, happened right there. We were on the sidewalk right there. And they didn't come towards us. They pushed it away from us, but still it was very scary. And my mom dropped my little sister's hand. Well, she stayed there, luckily. And she took my shoulders and she shook me and she said, "Don't ever tell anyone that you can do that." So it was really young in my life when the phone would ring and my mom would be in the kitchen and the phone was in the living room and I'd say, "Mom, Grandma's on the phone." And then she'd go in and answer the phone. It'd be grandma or mom, Betty's on the phone, her friend. No, it'd be Betty. And my mom would just be like, look at me and go, you know, how did she know that? And she was always disconcerted by it because she was also a very structured person as well. That's why she became a police officer. So it was hard for me to see those things happening when I was young, but I had this really strong feeling from a very early age that I had help. So there was a time when I was 17 years old. You know, I'm a hot 17-year-old. I'm a photographer intern at the local newspaper. The two big wig photographer guys have taken me on, a girl, as their intern. I'm so cool. And I'm riding my bike across the bridge from West Salem over to over to the main downtown area, which is kind of northeast Salem, to go to work. And I also worked in the circulation department and helped and all sorts of stuff at the newspaper. But I was like, totally the 17-year-old girl that had this cool job. Riding the bike across the bridge, all of a sudden, I feel this feeling like a hand or pressure on the back of my head, pushing my head down over my handlebars. And I don't want to ride with my head down over my handlebars because that's what 10-year-olds do. I am 17 and I'm not going to do that. So I'm pushing against it and fighting it, but it is stronger than me for sure. And I get down over the handlebars and I'm, clear down there. And just then this big box truck comes rumbling from behind me towards the downtown area on the bridge and has this really extended side mirror. And the mirror literally brushes the top of my head. And then right then the pressure stops. So I actually watch the mirror receding as the truck's continuing to drive. And I realized immediately, oh my God, if I'd been sitting upright, that would have hit me right in the middle of my back and knocked me over the front of my bicycle and probably into the tires of the truck because the little sidewalk was only about 3 feet wide that I was riding on. And I realized, oh my God, I just had my life saved. So I stopped my bike and I started crying. And I was facing the river so that the people driving by couldn't see me crying. And I said, thank you. I know that you're in my life. I know you're helping me. That's an exact moment when I know that you're there. And I don't know who you are, but God or angel or grandma or grandpa, I don't know who you are. I love you and thank you for helping me. And I just sat there and said, thank you for my life. And what's funny is that story is in the book that just came out by Guideposts magazine. It's called A Choir of Angels. Oh, there are 52 pages of my stories in there. They contacted me and they had a ghostwriter write them all up. But I sent this book to my ex-boyfriend who at age 17, we were together until age 19. And he's still a friend of mine. He's married and I'm married. We're all fun friends. And I sent the book to him and he called me and he said, Barbara, do you know, you called me the day that you left the work at the newspaper and you told me what happened. He said, I remember you telling me all the details that you wrote in the book. And he said, that's so amazing. He said, I almost felt like I was there when that happened. He wasn't, no one was close to me, but I was there on the bridge by myself. But yeah, it was just really cool I didn't realize I had told him about it. And, lots of times when things would happen and I just didn't know, I just said, thank you. I just always told them, I always felt that whoever it was, I'm grateful to you. I appreciate it. And if there's ever a time that you guys want me to come home, I'm ready to go home too. So I'm not worried about that at all. I never have been. Yeah.
So Barbara, so you're 17 and that happens and it's somebody from your experience, but now with all of your life experience and all of these interactions that you've had with the other side since you were 17, who do you think was guiding you?
An angel, one of my deceased friends or relatives. I've never needed to know. I've never asked them who they are. And I have always just felt that I just needed to be grateful. So whether it's God or whether it's Jesus or whether it's an angel or whether it's a friend that passed away. I don't know. And I don't need to know. I love them, and I'll know when I cross over. They'll say, hey, I'm the one that pushed your head down over in the bridge, or I'm the one that whispered in your ear when the truck, I need to tell you that story too.
Well,
But
do you think that you're unique in the ability that you have these beings guiding you?
I think everyone has them, but I think that people discount them or discredit them. And then it kind of closes the door to them being able to be really active in your life.
Why? Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know. My
You think
near
it's
death.
related to free will?
Yeah, possibly. I've never really thought it out. I know that I feel that my near death experiences opened the door for me, and then my gratefulness and my openness to have them talk to me or have them, be around me is really, I think, positive, and there's helps them to want to be around me. I've gotten in a car accident. I mean, the car accident happened, and I was okay, but it still happened. And so there's things that have happened in my life where I can see that, like, the marriage that I had, somebody could have warned me from that particular husband, but that wasn't meant to be. I was supposed to experience that. And I think that those things that you experience, then you're able to use to help other people. So my story now helps, hopefully, people who are in situations like that. But if I hadn't had that situation in my life, I wouldn't be able to use it as an experience.
Yes, I love that part. So, for people who want to hear and get guidance from the other side, what advice would you give to them? What can they do?
I think that just speaking to them, I don't believe in the kneeling on the floor and the hands together and the in the church thing. I don't have anything against that, but it's not necessary. I feel that all of your day and your thoughts and your situations are all open to them, and that if you are going to bed at night and you are going to say a prayer, then you just tell them, I love it that you're in my life, and I welcome you to, do anything you'd like to do to contribute towards it. And, just keep it an open. I just talk to them all the time. I'm driving in the car. I'm like, did you see that person that just drove over there? I'm like, even say, did you see that person? He was driving really bad. You need to help him, But it's not like weird. So, like, it's not like I'm talking to myself. I know that I'm saying this to them, and I know that they can then, and maybe they help that guy. Maybe he was meant to be driving like that. I don't know. But it's just this open communication. I just feel like all the time that I, feel that they're around, and that I love them, and that I want them here, and I don't know who they are, and I don't care. It's like, I love you no matter who you are. So it could be God, it could be anybody.
And
So I just
gratitude seems to be such a big part of your practice as well.
being open to them, just feeling like when I get these moments where I know something's going to happen, then I say thank you that they gave me that moment. I may not be able to do anything about what's going to happen. I may not be able to act on it, but I know that they're, giving me a moment of insight that I appreciate. And even if I can't change the outcome of the situation, the insight and understanding that they're there contributing to that insight is beautiful to me, and I love that interaction with them. Yeah, I can't wait to go home. So I want to tell you the truck accident before
Yes, I want you to tell this. This is one of my favorite stories.
Okay, so I had gone up to the San Francisco area and talked at 5 different IANS groups, and I'd been up there 4 days. My husband and I had driven up together, and he was driving me back down from San Francisco. It's about 5.5 hours to Santa Barbara. And just north of Santa Barbara, along the coastline, is what's called the Gaviota Coast. And a long time ago, it's the reason why the day was created that was, protecting the Earth Day, like Earth Day, was created in Santa Barbara because of a big oil spill that happened on the Gaviota Coast way back 1970s or something. So we're right there. We were coming from inland, and we turned the corner, coming along the 101 freeway, heading southbound. We're about 35 minutes north of Santa Barbara. And these big gusty winds always happen in that area because there's this big kind of tunnel between the mountains, and it comes through there, and it just is really gusty. And so we came around this corner, and these gusts of wind were kind of pushing against the side of the van. And I was laying back in my seat of the car on the passenger side, and I had my feet up on the dashboard, and I was just relaxing, and it was just getting dark, and I was looking out the window at the moon and the stars, and we were almost home, and nothing was worrisome. And this big gust of wind hit the side of the van, and where I was leaning back, I could see my husband struggling with the steering wheel to keep the car under control. And after it calmed down, the gust calmed down, and Victor was still on the road, thankfully, I said, Victor, I don't think we should do 65 with these big gusts of wind. I think we should slow down to 50 because we could lose control really easily. So what do you think? Let's do 50, okay? And he said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So he slowed down to 50. And I thought, we're okay. We're doing 50. We're safe. About 5 minutes later, I'm just looking out the window at the moon and the stars and stuff. And this voice in my ear on the side of the ocean side says, danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. And I'm like, so I sit up in my chair, I pull my chair up, and I put my feet on the floor, and I made sure that my seatbelt was nice and tight against me, and I'm right in case we're going to hit something, I want to be tight in my chair and everything. And then I realized I need to talk to Victor and say something. So I said, Victor, you know how I sometimes hear from the other side? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I just heard danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. And I said, so something, I don't know if it's a tree that's down. I don't know if it's a car that's stalled. I don't know what it is, but something bad is up ahead and we have to slow down further. I think we should do 30 miles an hour. And he goes, Barbara, we're on the freeway. We can't do 30. And I turned around and looked through our van, and it was absolutely black behind us. There's no street lights out there or anything. It's just this really rural 101 freeway along the ocean. And so I said, there's no one behind us. No one is going to care whether we are going 30 or 50 or 65. So why don't you do 30? And then if we need to, what we can do is speed up if somebody catches up to us. If you see lights in the rearview mirror, then speed up again if you feel more comfortable doing that until they pass us, and then we can slow down. He goes, okay, I can do that. So we're going along at 30 miles an hour, and about another 5 to 10 minutes later, we come around a corner, and up ahead in the dark is this police car, and its lights are, whirling around, and I don't know what's up there, but I felt immediately right here that that's where the danger was. And so I was really on high alert, leaning forward, trying to see out the windshield, what's up there in the dark. I can see the police car, but I can't see anything else. We're in the slow lane. And as we're coming along, we see that the police car isn't stopped off the freeway in the median strip. It is stopped squarely blocking the slow lane. So as we're coming up behind it, we're going to have to change lanes to go around it. So I start looking to see where the police officer is, and there's no police officer in the car, and neither is he anywhere within the range of his lights. So why would he park his car there and then leave it? What's going on? So Victor's coming along, and he starts to change lanes about, 50 yards behind the police car. He starts to come over to change lanes. And just when he does that, whoever it is that's warning me grabbed both of my upper arms. I literally felt their hands grab my upper arms. They came face to face with me, nose to nose, and they screamed, 10 miles an hour. I was so freaked out that they were touching me and that I could kind of see the shimmery vision of their face. I didn't recognize anybody. It wasn't like it was somebody I knew. And I was so freaked out that they did that I echoed 10 miles an hour. And I said that to Victor. And he had just changed lanes, so he slowed down. So by the time we got level and even with the police car, we were down to 10 miles an hour. And just as we slid past it, maybe another 40, 50 feet, I'm not sure. Our lights finally lit up the semi truck that had gone out of control and turned onto its side, and the dirty bottom of the truck was facing us, so there were no reflectors or anything. And the cop car had pulled up and had parked so far back from the truck that his lights didn't even light up the truck. And so we're heading for the cab of the truck, which is where the gas tanks are. And because we were only doing 10 miles an hour, Victor was able to swerve off into the gravel on the left-hand side of the freeway, not hit the guardrail, and go around the front of the truck. And on the far side, I mean, it was just this big shock. And on the far side, I looked out my window, and there was the cop standing up on top of the truck, leaning over, talking to the truck driver. And because of all the wind that was going and blowing, he didn't even know his back was to the freeway where we were coming from. He didn't even know that we had just passed and gone around the truck. And he, looked startled, and Victor continued going, and I immediately began thanking the other side for that piece of information that saved our life. And about maybe 5 or 10 minutes down the road, Victor was completely silent. He just watched that all unfold, and he just is completely silent. Then he turns and looks at me and he goes, "How is it that you're able to do that, Barbara?" And I said, "Victor, it wasn't me." I said, "I just listen, and I know that the other side is there. It was them taking the time to correct the situation. Maybe it was the truck driver's life that was important that they wanted to save. Maybe it was mine. Maybe it was yours. Maybe it was the police officers. But for whatever reason, all 4 of us got through that situation because they wanted it to happen that way." And so he was like, "If I had not just experienced that with you and watched that whole thing unfold," he said, "I never would have believed it. Even though I've been married to you all these years," he said, "if you told me and I hadn't been there," he said, "that would have been hard for me to believe." But he said, "Me watching that, wow."
Wow,
So
that is a warning. That's incredible.
it was so cool. I love the other side. I
The other
love them,
side is,
who they are. I love them. I love them. I love them. And I trust them. And I, always I'll go outside and say, "Hey, isn't it a beautiful day? Look at that palm tree. Isn't it gorgeous?" I'm talking to them. They know that I'm their friend. And, it's not, people think, and I'm saying this just in my head. I'm not saying it out loud. I'm just
yeah.
saying it in my head. I'm just sending them the love and the happiness and the joy when I've got something going on. I send that to them too. I appreciate them being in my life. They're definitely there. And I think that if people understand that and trust their intuition when they get that hit and they know something, to just, act on that instead of, thinking, "Oh, I'm just being scared," or whatever, what they want to dismiss it as. I think that's really where they start building up the relationship. And, I love mine. I love it. I love
Oh,
it. Yeah.
you are so blessed. Thank you so much for sharing these synchronistic stories. I think that they will heal people. And now I think people understand a little bit better how it works and that how they can apply it in their own lives. So one of the things I said at the very beginning of this interview is that you want people to understand that death is not the end all be all. So will you share your final thoughts on what and why you're not afraid of dying?
Yeah. It's because of my near death experience that I remember feeling that feeling of being wrapped in absolute love and acceptance, and just, oh man, I went from panic to, bliss in just the flash of a second when I went up on the ceiling. But so many other near death experiencers have had experiences like mine, as well as ones that went beyond the ceiling vantage point. 80% supposedly of near death experiencers in the world report that they just simply rise above their body in a car accident, in cardiac arrest, in a surgery, whatever it might be. They rise above their body and they feel that sense of beauty and love and acceptance, and they go back into their body. So that's why they're here to talk about their near-death experience. Only 20% of them go beyond that, and they have experiences where they find themselves in a meadow, like Dr. Mary Neal, who is an orthopedic surgeon in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, good friend of mine. And she found herself in a beautiful, beautiful meadow, and she was sitting on a rock, and on another rock that was right across from her was Jesus. And she spoke with him and talked with him. And she said that she felt so amazing, beauty and love and everything, that she actually didn't want to go back, even though she had young children and a husband that she adored, and a practice, an orthopedic surgeon practice in Jackson Hole. But what ended up happening was that Jesus told her that her son was going to have a very big issue and was going to die. A problem was going to occur and her son was going to die, and that she needed to be there to help the community adjust to the situation. And it ended up that her son was hit by a distracted driver who was texting while she was driving, and he was doing rollerblading with a girl that he was friends with. And they were it's like cross-country skiing, but you have rollers on the bottom of your skis, and it's when there's no snow. And he was hit by this texting girl. And prior to her hitting him, he had actually said to her at the peak of this hill that they'd gone up and looked down over the valley, he had said, if this is the last thing that I ever saw in my life, it's so beautiful. I want everyone to know that I lived a very beautiful life and I was very happy with everything that happened. Now I'm just remembering what she's told me, so that's not word for word. But then he also told the girl that he had a situation when he was 5 years old, when his mom had said, "Stop it, don't do that. That's dangerous. You could die." And he looked at her at 5 years old and said, "Mom, don't you remember the plan? I'm not going to die now. I'm not going to die till I'm 18.
Oh, wow.
He had already said that to Mary when he was only 5. And in fact, he ended up dying at around that age. And so Mary knew that, things are planned, and that life isn't, it isn't just arbitrary. You've planned things for your life to grow your soul, and that's what you're here to do. I really seriously think that it's important for you to constantly think about how you can be of help to others. And little tiny things like opening the door for someone or saying hello. Or the other day I was in my car at a gas station and my husband was pumping the gas, and an elderly man in a wheelchair rolled by the front of my car. I jumped out with some money in my hand and said, "Hi, I'm Barbara. Do you think it'd be okay if I bought you dinner tonight?" And he said, "Oh, that would be so amazing. Thank you." He was obviously homeless. And then he said, "Could you do something else to help me?" And I said, "Yes, of course, if I can. What is it?" He said, "I have a lidocaine patch that I need to apply to my lower back because it's in severe pain, but I can't reach it. Would you apply it for me?" And there at this busy intersection, at this gas station, I lifted his jacket and his shirt up and I applied his lidocaine patch. And believe me, that moment in my life is a special moment that I will cherish forever. I may never see him again. I've never seen him before. But that moment for me was so beautiful that he would trust me to put that lidocaine patch on him. And I felt just this wonderful connection when I put that on his back. Those are the moments you need to search for in your life. How can you touch someone else's life, and how can you let them touch yours in a beautiful way that will just be so precious to you forever? And when you have your life review at the end of your life, so many near-death experiencers will tell you, just like I saw all those little film clips, you will see all those moments that you touched other people's lives, both in good ways and in bad ways. And you want to try to do the good ways a lot more, because there's no one judging you when you get on the other side. It's you looking at your life and your experiences and you saying, "Oh, I should have done better on that situation." Or, "Oh my gosh, look what I did and how that went. That person, by me helping them, went out and helped that person. And you see the whole chain of events that happens after you've done something beautiful. So try to do that. Try to go out and just find every day something that you can do to help somebody else. Believe me, at the end of your life, you'll be happy you did.
Well, you have blessed us by being here and sharing your stories of kindness and gratitude and strength and resilience. So you've given us so much to think about, Barbara. Thank you so much. I love you. You're such a beautiful person. Thank you so much for being on my show today.
Love you and love all of you. Thank you for letting me be here today. And if anybody ever wants to contact me, I'll give you my email address.
I'll put your contact info down in the show notes. Thank you again.